Okay, this is it. This is it. The final chapter. Chapter 24 of 3 Bags Full by Leonie Swann. A murder mystery novel based on a good shepherd who is murdered with a spade and his flock of sheep set out to solve the murder. This book, from what I understand, has been turned into or is being turned into a movie, as well as there is a sequel to it on the way, I suppose. So let's go ahead and do chapter 24 today. I've got my little sidekicks here joining in on the fun. My flock does love when I read out loud. It doesn't matter about me telling a story. They like when I just talk out loud. So this has been a perfect venture for me to share in because, well, for someone like me, it's not just as easy as sitting down and curling up on a couch and reading a book. I do need to vocalize. That's who I am. I'm Natalie, the Good Shepherdess. And Shepherdess is something that I've learned from this book. I've been calling myself the Good Shepherd for many years now, since beginning a farm, a small hobby farm. And I never knew there was a female version to being a good shepherd. I'm the Good Shepherdess. With that being said, let's jump into chapter 24, the final chapter. Hey! Oh. And there we have it. Zora sees a cloud. Hold on. This is Siegel. Rebecca closed the book with a bang. That was new. The Pamela novels had been printed on soft, thin paper and would never have made such a good bang, nor would the newspapers. Willow, who had gone to sleep in the back row, opened her eyes and then silently turned her back to the shepherd's caravan. The others looked expectantly at Rebecca. "That's the end," Rebecca explained. "We'll start something new tomorrow." The sheep looked disappointed. What would happen to Heathcliff and Catherine as they wandered over the moors together? Why didn't the book go on to say how the moors smelled when a shower of rain had swept over them? The story must go on somehow. But Rebecca just sat on the top step of the shepherd's caravan and obviously had no intention of reading on. Her hand gently patted Tessie's head, and Tess wagged her tail very slightly. You could see it was the first wag of her tail for a long time. Hold on, I got a hair in my mouth here. One morning, Rebecca had brought Tess back in a car. Tess had strange, sad eyes. The dog didn't go racing over the meadow as usual. She didn't leap around the caravan looking for George either. Tess disappeared in Rebecca's shadow and followed her red skirt everywhere like a very young lamb following its mother. "Time to sleep," said Rebecca. The sheep looked at each other. The sun was still high in the sky. The shadows were no longer than 2 galloping leaps, and they hadn't finished their daily work of grazing and chewing the cud. Back in the hay barn? At this time of day? Never! Moreover, Rebecca had read aloud to them less than usual. They stared obstinately at their shepherdess. "More!" bleated Maud. "More!" bleated the 3 lambs. But Rebecca was not moved. Anyone could see she was George's daughter. "The story's over," she said. "That's it for today." Maud could sense the determination in Rebecca's face and fell silent, but the 3 lambs went on bleating. Rebecca raised her eyebrows. "Next time I'll read aloud from the Silence of the Lambs," she promised. Then she rose from the steps of the caravan. The Silence of the Lambs? That sounded promising. The mother ewes in particular hoped something would come of it. What is going on my head here? Seriously. "Go to sleep," said Rebecca. "We're off to Europe tomorrow, very early. I don't want to see any sleepy faces." And so saying, she disappeared into the shepherd's caravan with Tess at her heels. "Tomorrow!" bleated Heather. "Europe!" breathed Maisie. "It's good that we're going to Europe," said Cordelia thoughtfully, "but it's a pity it means we must leave here." The other sheep nodded in agreement. "If we could go to Europe and stay here at the same time," said Mopple, "then we could graze in 2 places at once." They thought a little bit about the wonderful possibilities of double grazing. Then Melmoth suddenly raised his head as if he had heard a call. His eyes were moist and shining. He began to prance about. "Come over to the cliffs with me," he said. "I want to tell you a story about saying goodbye." The sheep willingly went with him. When Melmoth told them something, it was like a strange wind caressing their faces. A wind spiced with vague, oh my goodness, a wind spiced with vague presentiments and mysterious scents. They followed the gray ram over to the cliffs. Suddenly, the crows on their tree began to caw, a blood-curdling sound, the cry of carrion crows. Instinctively, the sheep looked for the dead animal that must be the cause of all this uproar, but they couldn't see anything. When they turned around again, Melmoth had disappeared, just like that. They looked under the dolmen, in the hay barn, and behind the shepherd's caravan. They looked in the hedge and under the shade tree. Although Melmoth had been standing on the cliffs and couldn't possibly have galloped over to the hedge in such a short time, he must be hiding somewhere with his story about saying goodbye. But Melmoth was nowhere to be found. Then Zora bleated in surprise. She had tipped her head back and was staring bright-eyed up at the sky. A single dark gray storm cloud was hurrying past up there, driven over the sea by moody winds. "He's turned into a cloud sheep," bleated Mopple. "A cloud sheep," bleated the other sheep excitedly. "One of their flock had made it." Do cloud sheep come back?" asked a lamb after a while. Othello tore his eyes away from the beach and turned to Mopple, Maple, Zora, and Cloud, who were still looking up at the shaggy gray cloud with mingled veneration and sadness. Othello wondered if he ought to tell them. Of course Melmoth hadn't turned into a cloud sheep. Something much more mysterious had happened. He had simply climbed down the steep tunnel through the rock under the pine tree and gone away. Sometimes being alone is an advantage. Othello decided not to tell anyone. They wouldn't have understood it better. They'd have understood it worse. The more he knew about Melmoth, the less he really understood. And always he had the uneasy feeling that Melmoth understood perfectly. Understood himself. Understood Othello. All the sheep. Even the shepherds. Either that, or he was just crazy. Othello shook his head to get rid of the sadness, but shaking his head didn't help, nor did scraping his hooves. What helped him was the wind. For the wind brought with it, who knew from where, a leaf, and it laid it carefully in front of Othello's hooves. A golden leaf, autumn gold, swallow flying time, the time of sense, mating time. Once again he turned back to the meadow where Mopple, Maple, Zora, and Cloud were gazing reverently at a gray cloud. But he saw none of them. What he saw, what he scented, what he felt with all 7 senses, and several brand new autumn senses too, were 3 dazzling beauties with white fleeces and intoxicating scents, and a rival, young and strong, but inexperienced. Othello looked forward to trying his strength against the rival almost as much as to what would follow the duel. His hooves impatiently scraped up earth, and the blood flowed through his veins faster than usual. Then the wind turned, carrying away the scents of Zora, Cloud, Maple, and Mopple. Othello calmed down. Once again he looked down at the beach, where Melmoth had imperceptibly turned into a wandering gray dot surrounded by the darker gray of the water. From this distance, if he hadn't known better, Othello would have taken him for a small wave, a drift of spray, a little foam on the vast expanse of the sea. But Othello didn't see a gray wave. What he saw was a mighty rival moving away from the flock, his flock. And Othello was content. That's it. The end? Wait a second. And now there's another page here that says a note of warning. Oh no. The sheep of Glenkill are exceptional sheep. Ordinary sheep don't tolerate alcohol, drugs, or tomatoes. I must ask my readers not to tempt sheep to take any narcotic substances or plants of the nightshade family. If you really want to give a sheep something nice, try a moderate amount of bread or genuine grass. Wow. And there you have it. 3 Bags Full by Leonie Swann. We've just completed the book, and there's a whole other, it looks like a big chapter here of behind the scenes questions and answers. I look forward to reading this as well. There's even discussion questions. Who's your favorite sheep? When interpreting human behavior, the sheep often get it wrong. I mean, they're talking about humans. I mean, this is so beautiful, this book. Oh, and he does say it here. Look what he says. Look what it says. Big Bad Wolf. Wool. Continue reading for a preview of Big Bad Wool, the next sheep detective story by Leonie Swann. translated by Amy Bojang. Here's the preview right here. Oh my God, I'm gonna have to read this preview, right? No, not now. I can't do that now. I must get to work here. This is a long first preview chapter here. I'm gonna go ahead and get started on my farm chores here on my little small hobby farm and get back to reading perhaps a little while later with a cup of hot cocoa or hot tea, and keep that fire rolling out here behind Barnway with all of my flock chilling and delighting in this beautiful cold day in central North Carolina with their good shepherd, who's me, Natalie, the good shepherdess.